Greetings, everyone, and welcome. It's Sunday once more, which means it's time for another episode of the Captain's Table. In keeping with tradition, anytime there's a moderate life change or event in my life, I update the Captain's Table, increasing the season and dropping the episode number back. So, welcome to Season 4, Episode 1. For those of you who follow this particular vlog series regularly on my channel, you will know that 3 weeks ago I had a fairly good start to my weekend and was planning effectively a long weekend, something that I rarely have gotten and something that I was in desperate need of. Unfortunately, that weekend didn't go as planned. And many of you watched and commented on the video that immediately preceded it 3 weeks ago on Monday. I want to say a big personal thank you to everybody who commented on that video, sent me a personal message through Facebook, on Discord, and even World of Warships. Because of you guys, I have been able to accelerate my grieving process just a little bit. And it's opened my eyes to the realization that that bird and this loss isn't just a loss on me, but it is a loss on the entire community who has followed me so religiously, almost. Here on YouTube, on Twitch, in World of Warships, on Discord, and all of the other places. You expected to hear those little chirps and sounds. And I have suffered greatly, and I know you guys have missed those little sounds as well. So I, again, want to say a big thank you for all of those messages. They have really helped me. Now, the day that I put that video out, that short 50-something second video, was a very, very bad day for me. But somehow, through it all, and with effectively only a 2.5-hour nap, I managed, after crying very hard, to get my bird into my car and drive nearly 270 miles to the south to my mother's house in Oregon, without bawling my eyes out and causing a serious incident. But once there, I couldn't bring myself to remove my bird from the car. And so, fortunately, and one of the reasons I went down there was that I had an uncle available and my mother available to do the honors for me. And I buried my green sheet conure, Mochi, who has always been in the background in one way, shape, or form or another, and nearly all of my videos on this channel. It was after I came back from that trip the very next day that I realized I am not complete without a bird, without some kind of parrot somewhere in my life. Not just because I am clearly a captain, and a good captain always needs a parrot on their shoulder, but just because I've always been a bird person as opposed to a dog person or a cat person or any other kind of animal. I like birds. And almost immediately, upon my return and seeing that empty cage, and nearly again crying, I realized I needed to start the process of finding a new parrot. Now, in this particular case, finding a new parrot was not as simple as walking out of my apartment, going to the nearest local pet store, which almost always is going to have in stock some budgerigars, also known as budgies, or just the simple parakeet that you're all familiar with, a cockatiel, or even another green cheek conure. I have had or experienced all of those birds at some point in my life, and I don't ever want any of them again. Not because they're not great birds, but simply because I have learned lessons from them, or I've learned lessons from people who've had them and I've experienced firsthand, and I wanted a larger bird. Getting a larger bird requires visiting a specialized pet store, specifically a parrot store. Somebody who is going to have those larger birds in stock, or is going to have dedicated breeders that supply them with those parrots. Now, on top of wanting a larger bird, but not too large, maybe double the size of my last bird, because that's about what my cage can support, I also needed to factor in, and again, being a bird person, something that I know from seeing various videos, posts, all of these things, is that birds are especially susceptible to changes, and it can cause them some serious stress. And one of those stressful changes is coming home for the first time with a new person. And especially if it's a new bird, a young baby, more than likely, less than a year old, that is going to require time. Several weeks at a minimum, and by several I mean at least 6 weeks at a minimum, to get them home and get them comfortable so that they're not so stressed out about random errant changes to your schedule or to the environment as needed. But up to, and in some cases, several months. And at the time of my parrot's passing, I have, and still have, a scheduled 1-week trip down to Texas in November, basically 2 months. So effectively coming back from burying my bird, still deep in the process of grieving. So much so that I couldn't even touch the cage for a week and a half afterwards. I basically knew from that moment of realization that unless I somehow came back with a bird within the week, I wasn't going to come home and have a bird that was my own in my own home until I came back from Texas. Now that is both a good thing and a bad thing. On one side, if I had gone out and impulse bought a bird, I would have had to do some impromptu cage cleaning quicker than I probably would have been okay with. So that's a good thing that I didn't go out and do that. It's also a good thing because it means I can select the bird that's good for me. Bird species that I've done research on, that I feel are appropriate for my lifestyle and are going to be good fits. It also means that I can try and go out and select the right bird, a bird that ideally is going to want to come home with me. The bad part, though, means that even though I've cleaned the cage, and it did take me a good 2 weeks to get it all cleaned out, every single day I have to come home and realize that there isn't a ball of feathery fluff waiting for me that's happy to see me, that wants to come, that wants to snuggle, that wants to put in its 2 cents in videos like this and in my World of Warships content, in my live streaming content. It's just not there. And it's very, very depressing. Now, effectively, the immediate day following my return, I had looked up local parrot stores that I could easily drive to, that were within a relative or reasonable distance. And by that I mean they weren't much more than about a 30-minute drive outside of rush hour. In rush hour, you know, that's a whole nother story about trying to get to any of those. But I went to the first store on Wednesday, and I'd done some base research on a parrot breed that I was interested in getting. And I'd gone up there and I talked with one of the employees. Now, I looked at what they had available, and they didn't have what I wanted available. And I talked with the employee, and ultimately I put my name down on a list for a parrot breed. And they said they would contact the owner, who would contact the breeder, who would then, they would all contact each other and eventually get back to me within a couple of days. Well, after 3 days, they still had not returned my call, or they hadn't contacted me back. So ultimately what I did was I actually went up to another store. Now, this store was a little bit further away, but still within that driving range. And I went up there. And again, I met with one of the employees right off the bat, who clearly identified me as somebody who was distressed from, you know, a potential loss, and clearly looking for something, but not quite sure what exactly I was looking for in this situation. And this employee actually offered an option that was one of the parrots that I was thinking about, but I hadn't done as much research into it. Well, after the first one, which was an African Senegal parrot, I done even more research and discovered that it might not be the best option for me, as it tends to get a little hostile and aggressive against other people. And I want it to be a bit more of a social bird. I don't want my dad's bird, which is kind of aggressive to everybody that's not him. And he recommended another breed of bird. Now, they didn't have that breed of bird in the store. Well, I say that. They actually did have that breed of bird, but it was a 6-year-old. It was in the process of being rehomed, and it had 6 people fighting over taking home that bird. So there was no way that was coming home with me, and given my current status and my current situation, I'm not sure I can realistically deal with adopting a parrot at this point, dealing with rehoming another bird and doing that training and that trust exercises. In the future, that may be the case, and actually probably will end up being the case. But for now, I need a new bird that is my bird. It's not somebody else's bird. It doesn't have somebody else's issues. It doesn't have its issues that I don't know about that haven't been documented. Well, the species of bird that he suggested was known as the blue-headed Pionus, a South American, Latin American bird, same as the green-cheeked conure, but significantly larger. Not larger necessarily in overall length, as the average ends up being about 11 inches, where the green-cheeked conure, beak to tail tip, is 10 inches. But it's got a much shorter tail and a much stockier body, and it ends up actually being about triple the weight. So it will fit in the cage that I have. It's a more docile bird. Not as affectionate, not as lovey outright. Doesn't like to get down and snuggle necessarily. But it does tend to be more chill with other people, so I don't have to worry about that. It's also a quiet bird, comparatively speaking, and is content to play with toys. And as long as it's fed, has something to do, it's going to stay pretty quiet while I'm away at work. So my neighbors aren't going to complain about it. More importantly, he stated that they were planning on getting a couple of these babies of that species into the store in the next couple of weeks. The breeder had gone away, so she wasn't available to drop them off right away, but she would be back shortly, and they would have them. So while I looked around the store, he actually went up and put my name on the list for me, and I just verified the information, put down my phone number, talked with the owner, and effectively established myself as an interest in this bird. And they said they would call the breeder and they would give me a call back in a couple of days. Now that was on a Sunday. On Wednesday, I hadn't heard from them. And given the time frame that they were talking about and the little bit of research that I had done, I knew that if they were getting babies in, it was going to be the baby was going to be in the store probably until about I was going on my vacation anyway, which means the baby was only going to be in the store maybe 1 or 2 more weeks more than it needed to be until I could come home and I could take it home and take care of it. So I called them and I let them know and I put my name down again. Not sure if they cross-referenced it or anything. It's all done by handwritten, so they probably didn't. But I called them. I put my name down again. They called the breeder within an hour, and they called me back within an hour and a half, and they let me know it would be in the store next week. Effectively within a week. Now, I was excited at that point because that would be perfect timing, and I'm a big believer in universal timing, if you will. How I got my green sheet conure mochi, that was universal timing right there. That was, I had prearranged a plan to go collect old bird cages that were good size, collect all of the bird stuff. I had a ride home from my mother's as I didn't drive at the time. And my mom had suggested that I go look for the bird while I was down there because it would be tax-free. And sure enough, on Christmas Eve, I found that bird. And it had been in the store too long, so it was $100 off. It was a $400 bird, so it was $100 off, plus tax-free. So for the price of the bird in Washington, I walked away with the bird, a carrying case, a month's worth of food, a couple of toys, and a bunch of perches. So again, I'm a big, proponent of universal timing, and again, the universal timing here would work well. If it was going to arrive in the store next week, that would be about 6 weeks out, and that would be about the length of time it would need to be weaned, perched, as in it can perch on its own without assistance, and flighted so that its feathers would come in and it's looking to try and fly places. And I called them, and they called me back, and they told me within a week. And I was very, very excited about this prospect. And then, every day for a week, I waited. And every day, no phone call came. No updates. Nothing. And every day, once again, coming home to that empty bird cage, I grew slightly more depressed. More depressed, more depressed, more depressed. Thinking about all of the bad possibilities that could have effectively come from this. Maybe they got the bird in. And before they called me, somebody came in and said, "Oh yeah, I want that bird," and bought it. And so they didn't call me. Every single day, these thoughts come through your mind. And of course, as somebody who's lost a pet, or as somebody who's waiting, especially for like a special order to come in that's a rare thing, or they only get every so often, you know that feeling of, I'm waiting for it, but it's just not coming in. And your brain does these sorts of things. It plays these sorts of nasty thoughts and these nasty tricks on you. And it makes you think the worst. Well, on Tuesday night, I decided that if I hadn't heard from them by the end of Tuesday, basically that night, I was going to call them the next day and ask what the status was again, because I really did want to move forward with this bird. And right as I made that decision, and had texted my dad, who was also very much supportive, of the situation, and he had not been in the country for the last 2 weeks to help me grieve, to help support me, any of it, because he was in Africa on safari. When he got back, he was very, very supportive, and very much so like, let's do something today. Let's, keep me updated. Let me know. Are you, if you want to talk, I'm here. And he and I had discussed the situation. And basically I told him, I haven't heard anything. I'm going to call them tomorrow. And right after I sent that text message, within an hour, I actually got a phone call from a number I didn't have saved on my phone, but a number that I thought I recognized. And sure enough, I did a quick Google search. And the first response on Google was, in fact, the parrot store that I was, on a list for. And so I answered, and they said they had the bird. Now, they had originally thought they were getting 2 in. So I would get to pick between the 2, whichever one I felt the most connection with. But unfortunately, they didn't clarify with the breeder, and the bird species is increasingly becoming popular. So they were only getting 1. But I said I wanted to take a look at it, that I was still very interested, even if it was just 1, that I would be up the very next day. A day that I worked. And I work from 7:30 in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon. And from my work to this parrot store, it's not that big of a distance. It's about, I want to say, 15 miles. But because of traffic in the city of Seattle, and if you're from the area, you will know, that distance at 4:30 in the afternoon on a weekday is about an hour and 30-minute drive. That's Capitol Hill to Bothell. That store operates between the hours of 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. There was no way I was going to get to that store. The good news is that I had already started pre-planning this possibility. I went to my manager and I went to my supervisor and I said, if this store says they have this bird, which is very popular, it'll go quickly. They have this bird in the store on a day that I work. I'm going to come to you and I'm going to say, I'm leaving. I'm going to come in early. I'm leaving at 11 for my lunch, which is about 4 hours into my work shift, and I'll be back at like noon or 1, depending on traffic and how long I stay up there. So basically, I'm going to take a 2 or 3 hour lunch, and I'm going to stay the extra length of time until like 6 p.m. at work instead of leaving at 4 or 4:30. And sure enough, I got that phone call. I immediately sent my supervisor and my manager both a text message saying, I'm coming in early, I'm leaving at 11, and I'm taking a long lunch to go see this bird. My dad, who was very excited to get that text message telling him that the bird was in the store and I was planning on going up there and I was going to leave at 11 from my work, he said, I might come with you. And I told him, text me at 10:30, and so I know, so I don't leave earlier. He decided to come with me and we went up there. And now this bird is only 5 weeks old. They don't know if it's a male or a female yet, and it is very much so scared. It's kind of quaking, its wings are out a little bit, it's making noises between I'm hungry, feed me, and I don't know what's going on. But it still, to me, appeared to be one of the sweetest little things I have ever laid my eyes on. And they set us a chair up to sit in, and they gave us a towel to put on our lap, and so we could hold the bird in case it pooped, it wouldn't ruin our clothes. Which it did poop, and it just soaked right through the towel. Good news, I was wearing work pants that were double fronted anyway, and they're work pants, so they were going to go get gunked up with all sorts of nastiness later that day anyway. The bird was kind of scared. You know, new place, only 5 weeks old, strange people. But I sat with it and held it for a good, I want to say, 25 minutes. And I just petted its head the whole time. And it calmed down. By the end of it, it was a calm bird. It was not necessarily content in my lap. Certainly kind of stood up and flapped his wings a few times. But it felt real. It felt, for the first time in what was effectively a little over 2 weeks, like that void in my heart had been filled. And so I decided that yes, this was the bird for me. A little baby blue-headed Pyonis. And while I don't necessarily know the sex just yet, the store is going to do a DNA test for me before I take it home. So I will know if it is a boy or a girl, but I have decided that I think for this bird, I'm going to name it Echo. For obvious reasons. Now, a couple of things to note with this bird. First is its size. The size range for this particular parrot says that it should be between 10 inches and 12 inches in size. Beak to the tip of the tail. It should be between 200 and 265 milligrams. Or grams, I'm sorry. Or about 7 to 9 ounces. And when they weighed it at 5 weeks, it was already 226 grams. So it was already well inside of its size range. So I'm looking forward to this bird. I'm hoping it's not too big for the cage that I have. The good news is they're not escape artists, so the cage that I have's adequate locking system and bar thickness should be fine to retain it. I'm just hoping that it's big enough that if it wants to stretch its wings, it can do so. And if it decides it wants to crawl down to the bottom, play with something, crawl up to the top, maybe flap or jump or whatever, it still can. Because that's important to good bird health. The second thing was, I knew that my dad coming with me would probably result in him offering to pay the deposit on the bird. And I kind of suspected that this bird was going to be expensive. From what I had asked in the store, this is going to be about a $1,500 bird plus tax. Plus the DNA test. So I was prepared to put down $750 on my credit card to pay for the deposit on this bird. And when my dad said he was going to come, I kind of expected him to put the deposit down for me, just as a gesture of good faith, as a support mechanism. Now, that's not saying if he hadn't have done that, I'd have been upset. On the contrary, I was, again, more than willing to do it. The fact that he came with me, and I expected it more out of a, I assumed that's one of the reasons he decided to come with me, based on how he's handled my mom's situation in the past with her puppy. So, to my surprise, though, he didn't just offer to pay the deposit on the bird. he bought the bird outright. He paid for the full price of the bird, and the bird was a little bit more expensive than I was expecting. Well, I say that with tax, it ended up being a little bit over $1,600. He was a little bit surprised because based on the research that he and his husband had done, they were thinking it was going to be like $750. I had told my mother, how much that bird was going to cost, about $1,500. And I told my manager, but apparently I had forgotten to tell him. So that was a little bit of a shock to him. However, he did pay for it in its entirety. And that is effectively going to be an early Christmas present to me. So in that respect, I am very, very fortunate. I don't have to incur the additional debt of buying the bird and to replace that chunk of me that has been missing. And on the other side of it, I know that I have a very caring family and a very caring parent who, as a bird person in himself, knows how much this does mean to me. Now, because the bird was only 5 weeks old, still in the process of being weaned, still in the process of perching, still in the process of being flighted, although the store did clip its wings just so that it wouldn't try to fly and hurt itself while it was in the store. It's kind of a liability on them, which is perfectly acceptable, and I completely understand that policy on their part. It basically means that I don't get to take the bird home until it's ready to come home, which they said could be anywhere from 3 weeks, about 8 weeks old, to 6 weeks, depending on when it wants to come. And I said that was fine at the point that we purchased the bird. Looking at it, I'm still about 7 weeks out from being able to take it. So at this point, and I talked to them about it, I basically said, look, even if it's ready to come home early, say mid or end of October, I can't take the bird because I'm going on this trip. I don't want to take it home. I don't want to have it for just 2 weeks and then stress it out by having to take it somewhere else and have somebody else care for it for a week. And they said it was perfectly acceptable and perfectly fine to keep it in their store where it would be comfortable until I can take it home on the 10th of November. So on about the 10th of November, I'm going to be bringing home this new little baby bird and working with it. And I'm thinking I'm going to start a YouTube channel just for that bird and just for working with that bird. I will do a promo video, and of course we'll have videos on that bird here on my channel occasionally as I feel necessary and as requested, of course, by you guys. Now, as mentioned, because it's still in the store, it isn't home with me, which means I don't get to see it every day. I don't get to bond with it. I don't get to cuddle with it. But I have 2 days off a week. And so for those 2 days, every week until it comes home with me, or at least until I'm gone on my trip, I am going to be at that store for a minimum of an hour each day, bonding with my parrot. And if you're watching this video on the day that it's uploaded, or even the following day on Monday, there is a good chance that I'm probably at that store bonding with my new parrot. Anyway, that's it for this week's episode of The Captain's Table. It was a long episode, over 30 minutes at this point. Again, I want to thank each and every one of you who watched that video and commented and left your condolences, left your thoughts and prayers, left your just message of support on that video and messaged me in support, have messaged me since in some of my World of Warships videos talking about missing that bird. I want to thank you for those messages. It's still difficult for me to remember that bird because the loss is still so recent. But at the same time, there were good times that were had, and I will always love that bird. I'm hoping this new bird will be equally loved, will bring equal love, and will be preferably much longer lived. As always, I'll see you guys next time. This is Captain Rye, signing off.